Good morning again. Today we're going to walk through the Transit Development Plan and provide some context and walk through some of the projects that make up the Transit Development Plan update and our community outreach that's planned for this summer, which is quite extensive. So the Transit Development Plan is something that serves as sort of a strategic planning document for the agency. It helps to identify priorities and allocate funding toward transit projects that are of most need. We have traditionally in our Transit Development Plan always had a component in the plan that shows what we can do with status quo funding and an element of the plan that we called the vision plan that shows sort of what we would do if unconstrained, a type of needs plan. Now, the Transit Development Plan is something that transit agencies throughout the state of Florida do. It is a condition of being able to receive block grant funds from the state of Florida DOT. And it is an important document for us to communicate to FDOT and to organize the service that we plan to implement over the following 10 years. And it's important that this document be a living document. So it's updated every 5 years with an extensive update process. The last update here for HART was the fiscal 2012 TDP update. But we also update it on an annual basis and submit those updates to FDOT, and those updates of the TDP come to the HART board. The annual updates are more abbreviated. We look at what our accomplishments have been over the previous year. We revise the implementation plan, and we look at the financial plan and make updates to that. But knowing that this is a living document, something that's very important for us to organize where we're going as an agency, in our annual updates, we've also at HART, in the last few years, in 2014, aligned the Transit Development Plan development process with our budget process. So the service that we plan to implement in the coming year becomes integrated into our budget planning process. And that's been a very helpful step for us in terms of how we align those two together. Also, in these annual updates, we've taken great pains to make sure that we are integrating into the updates many conversations that are occurring in our community around transit and transportation. In community relations, we attend many events every year. Last year, almost 300 community events, whether it's senior center presentations or we're attending chamber events. We're hearing from people of all stripes and colors about their needs and their interests from the transit system. And this year's been no exception, with a lot of discussion in our community about transit and transportation centered around the Go Hillsboro process. We've been hearing a lot from many different people in terms of needs and desires and interests about how our transit system can be more relevant and attractive, and how we should align our 10-year plan to meet some of the needs and interests of people in the community. We recognize that for us to truly be community-driven, we have to know that we operate the transit service in our community, but it's truly our community that owns it. And so when we make changes to routes, if we are making a modification, adding new service, we are constantly going out to the public, asking for feedback. We recognize when we put service out that it's only successful when the public is involved in the planning process. And so the Go Hillsboro process over the last several months and truly over the last couple of years has been a great process for us to get input, work with our partners from the cities and the county to understand what people's desires are. So since February, HART staff has participated in all 36 of the Go Hillsboro meetings. We've received a lot of great input on transit. There's a lot of interest around this issue. And there are various needs and interests that were expressed in these 36 meetings. Some of the things that we heard, a perception that the current transit system is limited, inadequate, and underfunded, but also a continual theme that we heard about redesigning transit, to include things like true commuter express service and real park and rides. We heard a lot of interest in commuter service and park and ride service that could be more relevant to someone's commute. A lot of our express service now, it serves residential areas to downtown. But people came to us and said, we don't all work in downtown. We need to get to West Shore, to the university area. So we heard a lot about express service and a true park and ride network. We heard a lot about sort of solution-oriented transit. So people would come up to us and say, I really want to ride transit, but I don't want to get on a bus. And so people were asking us to look at other solutions. They're looking for a transit agency that doesn't just solve the transit challenges that people have by putting out a 40-foot bus into a community. There was interest in smaller vehicles and different types of service, engagement of the private sector. So we've sort of coined this solution-oriented transit. And we heard a lot of interest about service in areas that don't have robust service today. Some areas of our community look very different now than they did 10 years ago, and yet the transit footprint in some of those areas still looks similar to what it did 10 years ago. So we know that there are some areas that are not served and underserved, and we heard some interest in transit service there, and some real interest in how we can use some alternative solutions to help people connect to our network from those areas. And then we also heard and acknowledged that we need to be able to make sort of a minimum commitment to our customers on frequency and weekend service. So for our service to be attractive to people, we have to be able to operate on the same frequency throughout the day. We need to be able to offer the service into the evening, especially when those late shift workers need to be able to utilize the service. And we know when we add service into the evening or into the weekends, it can make it much more feasible for somebody to use the service throughout the week. So we heard a lot of those types of stories as well. If this route ran later, then I truly could give up my car and use HART to make my commute, to live my life. And this input is a critical part of how we plan our service. So Justin Begley from our service development and planning group is going to walk through a little bit some of the factors that we're looking at when we plan the service that we put out on the street, the service that we put in a 10-year plan like the TDP.
Good morning, Justin Begley, HART planning staff. This is a good time to take a couple minutes. I know the question's been asked to talk a little bit about how we go about some decision making and service design in the service development department. How we plan and evaluate service that's on the table. It's good to start for a moment with a little bit of talk about values and what we value when we look at service improvements. This funnel here reflects kind of 4 high-level steps, and always we begin with what Marco just talked about, the public input portion. That's the first ingredient to the process of doing service evaluation. It's got to reflect what people want, what they need. Also, we need to categorically look at who we serve with our service that's out there today, but also who we should be serving. It's not always just a matter of our current rider population. It's getting into markets that we don't currently get to right now. We also need to constantly monitor the quality of the service that we do have out there so we can trend that in a positive direction through a number of measures I'll talk about in a moment. And then finally, as we're looking at service, we've got to know that whatever we put out there has to lower the barriers to using our service. So we try and take a step back and put ourselves into the shoes of the transit rider and say, if I were to try and use this service, does it make sense? and is it easier than what we had previously? We're always trying to improve. So as I mentioned, how do we measure? It's not enough to say that we have values, but we have to have measurable things that we can manage. And to accomplish this, we look at a number of measures. Some are industry standard measures, things that we can compare ourselves to other transit agencies, and then some are things that we think a little bit innovatively. We have some tools that are pretty advanced that we can look at transit network improvements. So the public input portion, we use a combination of both event-based input as well as an ongoing process, things like you see here onboard surveys, and obviously Go Hillsboro is kind of unprecedented for us to have this amount of input to use. Then, who we serve and should be serving is really a measure of how we can categorically look at our customers and make sure that we understand that there are some people that depend on transit service, and then there are some people who we would like to serve with transit service. And we look at some things like the age of certain populations, whether there's automobile ownership at the household level where our riders or where our services go or designed to go. And again, we look at trends on our network design, and here next to how well we serve are some of the things that we look at. There are actual measures associated with these that we can look at and internally reflect on how well our service is performing. And as I mentioned, I'm going to give you an example real quick of this lowering barriers to using HART with some things that we didn't have even a few years ago to be able to compare service. So this map I have up right now is what the transit network would look like to somebody who's at the airport trying to take our bus service to get home, whether from work or from a air travel trip. And what you can see here, the areas in green are pretty reasonably accessible by transit. We can get you there in times that are not quite comparable to automobile, but pretty good. As you get into the yellow, oranges, and reds, it starts to become quite a chore and difficult to reasonably use transit. And not surprisingly, the farther you get away, the longer it takes. Well, I have a second map that kind of shows why that is. And a lot of it has to do with how many buses it takes to get where you have to go. The green here is a one-seat trip. You can get on a bus at the airport and get to that green area pretty quickly with one bus. As you get into the yellows and the reds, the yellow is one transfer, the red is two transfers. This map actually times out at 2.5 hours. So if you're not even shown on this map and you're in a transit network, that means it takes more than 2.5 hours to get there. The amount of resources that are required to perform more efficiently to get people out there are currently, we don't have them. So I would take a moment. I just want to wrap up by talking about, so we talked a little bit about what we value, how we measure it, and then finally, what are the solutions we can apply to improve service. Certainly, an expansion of some of the things we currently do, like the HART Flex, the Metro Rapid Premium Transit, as well as some new local routes that can both expand who we serve as well as the people we currently serve, improve how well we serve them. So lowering barriers to using HART, a big one here would be the regional park and rides with an express bus network expansion, creating more robust connections to the places that we currently access, but as well as going to the places Marco talked about, some destinations we don't currently serve. That we think can reasonably produce people into transit that don't currently consider it or ride it. Frequency improvements, late night and weekend service. This gets to how well we serve, because frequencies where a bus only comes once an hour, twice an hour, makes it very hard. If we can up that, also if we can expand into the night and weekend periods, that improves how well we provide service. The first mile, last mile connector gets us into places in the county that we can't reasonably operate a bus. And finally, what we need is the infrastructure expansion, the buses, a maintenance facility to accommodate all this, as well as some bus stop improvements to improve the waiting times at bus stops. And finally, what happens when this process is complete is at the bottom of the funnel here, it results in hopefully in some recommendations that when we bring them out to people, they respond to, that they want to see enacted, and we'll always listen and refine those as time goes on. And I'm going to go ahead and have Marco wrap up the presentation.
So that sort of takes us now to the two plans that make up the transit development plan and kind of where we are today. So I'm going to walk through quickly the TDP action plan and the HART Go Hillsboro component. First, the action plan. So we talked about how the TDP really is an important document. It's aligned with our budget process so that we can look at what we are going to do in a proactive way today to help meet some of the expectations that our customers have of our service. We know that although we may be planning with status quo funding, that it's not enough to have a status quo plan. Our customers deserve better than that, and they expect more from their transit agency. So our TDP action plan contains a lot of improvements in existing service. Here to start with, you see our current services, and in light blue, the lines you see there are our local routes. The darker blue lines are the express service. And then, of course, you see Metro Rapid. You see the transit centers and the disparate park and ride lots. There are about 23 park and ride lots throughout our service area today. And you see here as well the current HART flex zones. So our action plan takes this existing service and looks to find ways to optimize it, to make it work better. So in 10 years, there are some frequency improvements, some late night and weekend service expansions, routes that, again, we talked about meeting, sort of establishing some minimum expectations for service, frequency, and late night and weekend service. So the action plan here takes our service and makes sure after 10 years that all of our core routes operate 30 minutes on Saturdays and Sundays. It ensures that our local service goes until 10 o'clock consistently. It takes some routes that have more frequent service at peak hours and less frequent service at non-peak hours, and it takes that route and makes it more consistent throughout the day. Some of the things that our customers have come to us saying that it can make a significant difference in the way that they utilize the service. So it helps set some minimum expectations for the service, something that people can expect. But we also try to reorganize some routes. For instance, the Route 10, we would reorganize it to serve Rocky Point and many retail and service jobs that are in that area and that are not served as well as they could be today. So we're also looking at ways that we can make some potential modifications to service to extend it and meet some needs. There are new hotels and other complexes in that area that were not there and that need to be served going forward. So here you see the service improvements on the map, the light orange color, and you see that many of our routes experience some frequency and late night and weekend improvements, including some flex improvements. But you also see here that there is some new service that's added in the action plan. So in 10 years, you'd see the implementation of 6 new routes that would be van-based. This includes a new Tampa Flex, which will start in this coming fiscal year and is part of has been input into the budget that will be coming to you. There's also a Temple Terrace Flex that's introduced in 2018. And this action plan implements the South Shore Community Plan. So you would see new loop circulators in South Shore and 2 new HART Flex zones. This has been the result, the South Shore Community Plan was the result of extensive involvement in the community. The MPO, HART, and many stakeholders from the community participated in the development of that plan. And here we have tried to make the commitment to that community that with our status quo funding, that new service and enactment of that plan is something that is important.
Okay, yes, go ahead.
What is status quo funding, just from my perspective?
So status quo funding, we're really looking at what our current service, what our current funding is without the addition of a new revenue source. So we're looking at what we intend to do with our current funding streams.
So what's that as a percentage year-over-year increase that you're basing on status quo? Because you're getting millage increase this year. So status quo is a baseline budget is what I would imagine. And is what's that number?
Do you want to speak to that? About 5%,
5% year-over-year increase going into services.
approximate.
Yeah, Commissioner Merman.
Thank you. And can I follow this up?
Yeah.
Jeff, that 5%, is that all, you're basing all that on increased property tax revenue coming in to HART?
Good morning, Jeff Seward, Chief Financial Officer. Mainly the ad valorem increase, but also increased ridership and increased fare revenues and anticipated increases in federal formula funding. But the majority of it is property tax.
And you are expecting most of the 5%. That's pretty ambitious.
We're following the state of Florida anticipated.
Okay. I do want to just ask another question about these two maps. So
Sure.
the status quo map, the one with the light blue lines, actually between the two maps, nothing really has happened yet, right?
Right, so what this is showing, the blue is, it indicates our current service. And then that light orange that you see on top, that's the current service that sees improvements. So frequency improvements, new late night service and weekend service. And then the reds that you see there are the areas that would see new service that doesn't exist currently.
But the dark blue lines are new service also?
That's current express service. So that dark blue shows, those are our current express routes.
Okay. And I guess you've got this correlated to some kind of cost number.
Right.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
So we're having a 5% per annum increase this year to the base budget, expected. So this is a 10-year plan. So when we say status quo, so does that 5% increase to the base budget then carry it for 9 years, or is it 5% a year?
And the status quo plan serves as a guiding document for us to show what we implement as additional funding becomes available based on that growth that's expected.
Go ahead. Oh, excuse me, Commissioner Breckner.
Oh, one more follow-up. I don't know, maybe this is for Jeff. What has been, if we looked at the past 10 years, what has been the average? I know that we've had a pretty severe downturn at one point in time, but what would be the 10-year average?
Do you have that number, Jeff? Yeah.
The average over the last, let's just say over the last 3 years has been 11%. Prior to that, from FY '08 to now, about 4% due to the downturn. We had some obviously negative years and 0 years of growth.
So you would consider 5% a pretty conservative figure then?
It's on the cusp of conservative and moderately aggressive.
Yeah, and
You must have been
is
in
that
military
the-
intelligence at some
Is that
point.
the difference between Donald Trump and Ted Cruz?
I'd rather find one.
I'm assuming you put that out there, it's a number that you're comfortable with, because I would also tend to agree it seems to be a little bit towards the aggressive side if we're planning that every year for 10 years.
For the 5-year financial plan, we have a 5% growth built in. For the TDP plan that goes out 10, we kept it a static 5. In the past, we've kept it a steady growth rate for the first 5 years and then downgraded that annual increase after the 5 years. For this plan, we went ahead and kept it at 5, but it can be moderated and adjusted as we start to see, particularly what happens in fiscal year next year with the property valuations if it still continues its upward trend.
I just think we should err more on the conservative side, because we plan that aggressively for 10 years out, and all of a sudden we get into another deep financial situation, and then we're potentially looking back, I would imagine, cutting back services and taking away services from people that have depended upon them.
Possibly. As well as our revenue growth rate, we also have a projected increase of our fund balance each year as well. So coupled with that increase in anticipated revenue growth, we have a percentage of that component that's going to drop the fund balance each year projected as well, right around 1.5% to 2% each year. Hopefully, that would be able to prop that back up like we were able to do over the last few years after the downturn.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Director Carino? And
This is really a guidepost for how we're going to manage services going forward, correct? This isn't a detailed budgeting exercise. This is an exercise that says, assuming our budget stays substantially the same, here are the operational and service decisions we're going to make over the next 10 years and how we're going to prioritize them. Is that correct?
And that is correct.
Okay.
And that is why 2 years ago, we tied the TDP and the budget together. So we have the status quo plan or the action plan.
So the
As we
budget
move
moving 2% here or there probably doesn't have a substantial impact on this 10-year plan?
No.
you can.
Yes and no. Each year, what
I
we want
understand
to
that
be
sounded like a trick question, and it really wasn't intended to be a trick question. I can see you were very smart in sort of processing it as if it was. Now, really, the point being, this is a plan for how we're going to prioritize service and operations, and I just don't think we should get caught up in this percentage budget discussion right now. We can worry about that at budget time.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Jacobs?
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. I agree with that. I think that it's kind of interesting. You know, I'd be curious once we have a chance to jump into the budget part of it to understand, especially from the ad valorem tax side, of how much of that that budget is tied to the actual increases with property value assessments versus the amount of percentage of revenue that will come in just because there's so much projected growth in our community over the next 10 years. You know, there's going to be more people paying more taxes. So I'd be curious with that. But I do agree. I think that the interesting thing on this plan is that putting a plan in place that is has the ability to be flexible enough to adjust to the budget constraints or the budget increases is the critical part of the strategic process that we have to put in place here, because I think that's being prepared for what is going to happen regardless of what we can predict. How accurately we can predict is really the important thing in the planning process. So I think that starts to show what this is based on what I'm understanding, Jeff, is it has this flexibility in order to, and I think you mentioned that should additional funding be found for whatever locations that funding may come from, that this plan, we can jump into other aspects of the plan beyond what we're trying to do with just based on the status quo funding. That's my understanding what you're trying to say.
Yeah, I think that's fair, yes.
Okay, Director Jarosh?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment. I seem to think that the property appraiser has already given us an estimate of 7%, somewhere in that ballpark. Is that still valid, or have we had a recent update to that? Because to me, when I heard 5%, I thought that was a little bit on the conservative side based on what I recall. 7.4, okay. So yes, and seeing that this is a plan where if we do meet these revenue benchmarks, this is what service we'll get into. I totally agree with Director Crino and Jacobs that, you know, we do need to plan. And in my past experience on the board, I think we've always met these benchmarks because we have been adding night and weekend service and increasing our frequency. So I'm glad to see the trend continue.
Okay. Any other questions before Marco? Thank you. Go ahead, Marco.
And our customers certainly are interested in this. They want to see what we're planning to do, what's coming in the coming year. How are you going to improve my route? Where are these, you know, where the improvements come in? So at the bottom of this slide, you see additionally, so we've talked about frequency improvements, late night service and weekend service. We talked about the addition of new van-based routes, but on top of this as well are some new pilot initiatives, new alternative transportation options that we're moving forward with. One is the HART Plus Customer Choice Pilot, which presents a real opportunity to improve the quality of the HART Plus service by engaging a private provider to help make some of those trips for HART Plus and really improve the customer's experience on HART Plus. And the other exciting one as well, the first mile, last mile connector service, which we're looking to pilot in 2 to 3 zones in the coming year. And that provides a great opportunity, again, to engage a contractor, the private sector, to help connect people to our network. And there are some areas of our community where this could be very successful and where there's a lot of interest. Making that first mile and last mile connection is one of the things that can sometimes be an impediment for someone to utilize our service. So we heard quite a bit about that as well, and we hear about it on a regular basis. From here, we'll take the action plan and talk about the HART Go Hillsboro Plan. So as Ms. Egan said earlier, we've been actively engaged with Go Hillsboro from the very beginning. We've been sharing our transit development plan with Go Hillsboro throughout the process, and the HART TDP projects are the transit projects that were presented at the Go Hillsboro meetings, and the public had an opportunity to provide reaction and input on those projects, on those route improvements, on the new service improvements, and in the 36 meetings that HART has participated in. So we've integrated the input from those meetings, and we have now an idea of what 25% of a half-cent sales tax would be. We know what the proposal is in the Go Hillsboro Plan. And so the HART component of the Go Hillsboro Plan, what I'm going to walk through now, presents really what we would do based on the input that we've received thus far, the service planning principles that Justin talked about, what we would do with an additional $30 million a year. In this plan, we start, and you'll see this map here, we start with the action plan service. And on top of it, we show additional frequency improvements. So there are some frequency improvements that are at the peak hours, which require additional vehicles, but are very much needed to, again, bring some core service to a more consistent frequency. So our core routes where we have high utilization, we can bring those frequencies to more consistent level. And it also gives us here some improvements on flex. So we increase some frequency in some of our flex zones. We also make an improved connection with PSTA in Oldsmar by extending Route 34 to Oldsmar. We also provide a new connection, a local service connection to McDill by extending the Route 46, which provides a local connection again from McDill through downtown into Brandon. And then we add 6 new local bus routes. You'll see them here on the map. The new local service is indicated in red on the map. And the new local service would be Fishhawk, Lithia, Bloomingdale. There's a Brandon to USF connection. You see a Bears Ehrlich local route, and you see a Lumsden Bell Shoals route on the map. These again are areas of the county where they are somewhat underserved. We know that there isn't much local service, if at all, in some of these areas, and so there's real potential here to capture some ridership and meet a need that is clearly there. Additionally, on this map, you see the addition of 3 new Metro Rapid routes, one which connects Temple Terrace to the airport through West Shore. That's the Metro Rapid East-West. You also see the Metro Rapid connection from Brandon into downtown, and then the connection from downtown to West Shore to the airport. And with Metro Rapid, this is a good example too, where we're in the process now too of planning and getting more information about what that corridor could be on the Brandon to downtown route, working with county staff and the MPO. We kicked off recently some study efforts to look at what corridors make sense in the Brandon area. So there's an opportunity to engage in some of that dialogue through this outreach as well. And then you see the addition of some new HART Flex zones. And the HART Flex zones, again, are a great way to be able to connect some areas that are a little bit less populated in some instances with our service area. So the addition of HART Flex is pretty significant here in this plan. And then you see a real robust change here when we add in the express service. So this plan includes a robust express network and park and ride system. So we have sort of distributed 23 park and rides throughout the county today. We would move to a more regional park and ride system, and again, serve some areas with express service that are not served currently. Most of our express now goes to downtown or to MacDill Air Force Base. This express network serves other locations like USF and the West Shore area. So here in the light purple you see the areas where there would be expanded express. In dark purple you see new express service in the network. Now, the big change and what makes this a much more robust commuter express is that we're talking about taking a network now that has about, some of our express routes run twice in the morning and twice in the afternoon. We're looking at here a service that operates about 8 buses in the morning and 8 in the afternoon, giving much more flexibility to people who are utilizing the express service and making it a lot more attractive to people with different work schedules and different needs for being able to arrive at work. You see here the addition of that robust commuter express and park and ride network. You also see here the addition of an express service from downtown to the airport, and then Carillon in Pinellas County and downtown St. Petersburg. And this is a service that in this plan would kick off in 2017, which would be expected to be available and in place with the opening of the CONRAC, the Consolidated Rental Car Facility at Tampa International Airport. And we've been through this process coordinating with our partners and talking to them about needs and how this service would integrate into some of those exciting new projects in the area. In our vision plan, of course, as well, there are some infrastructure needs. Some of the things that help us expand the network and improve the peak hour frequencies are acquisition of additional vehicles. With new service comes the need to make sure that we're putting out accessible bus stops and making those needed improvements and additions. And it also includes the addition of a new satellite operations and maintenance facility, which would be necessary in order for us to expand the fleet in the way that we've proposed here. And as important as those other things as well is the supportive technology that accompanies all this. We've had a real, I think, laser eye focus on trying to improve the customer experience and leverage technology in various ways and try to understand how people use the system and how we can use supportive technologies, use technology to help us make the experience of working and interacting with our service a lot easier for the customer. So that's an important component here of meeting the infrastructure needs of this expanded network. And with this, of course, we talked about in the action plan a commitment to piloting these new programs. The Go Hillsboro component here allows us to make a long-term commitment to the HART Plus Customer Choice Program, the first mile, last mile connector, and it gives us the ability also to look at some other more solution-oriented transit types of solutions, whether it's late night shuttles and other things that people have talked to us about having an interest in. So at this point, this plan is not done. It's very important that we have integrated input from the initial 36 Go Hillsboro meetings. we bring this out for public comment. We want to hear what people think. Have we heard you? Are we on the right track? We've scheduled 10 open house style meetings starting Thursday and running through Labor Day, and we look forward to hearing from the public. Today we've presented the draft TDP to the HART board. You'll receive a presentation on the final proposed budget at the committee meeting in August. And then there are 2 public meetings on the budget in September on the 14th and the 28th. And with those, we'll be bringing back the TDP with public input and comments incorporated so that the HART board can take action on the revised TDP with that input. And of course, with the next series of Go Hillsboro meetings, we will be actively participating and continuing to hear reaction to this plan. So these open house meetings, we want to hear from people, we want to get comments. We're meeting throughout the county, including a partnership over the Memorial Day weekend with the MPO, where we'll be at the Florida's largest home show at the fairgrounds, and people have an opportunity to provide us input there, in addition to many other places that we plan to go, and we're planning to go to some places that are not necessarily the usual suspects. And we look forward, you see some of the boards presented here in the room that will be presenting at these meetings. We want to give people information about what we have and how we've come to this plan. But we also want to interact with people. So we've actually developed something that we can use on a tablet, and we can actually, it's GIS based, looks a lot like Google Maps, and you can actually see the service that we currently have, zoom into someone's neighborhood, identify where transit centers are, where the new service would be implemented. And that's kind of a neat tool that we can utilize to help people better understand how this plan might apply to them. We'll also have some project lists so people can kind of see the implementation schedule in the plan and have an opportunity to comment on it and give us their thoughts. By talking and interacting with HART staff, by submitting a comment form, and we're of course also accepting comments from people by email. There's an email address here. We have a comment line that people can call and provide input to us, and we encourage comments as well on social media through Facebook and Twitter. We look forward to hearing reaction to this plan from the public.
Okay, thank you, Marco. I think Ms. Egan wanted to make some final comments.
And, thank you, Mr. Chair. And just to wrap up, when we're talking on our Go Hillsboro component, when we say this is what meets the need to explain what that investment does in the county, bear in mind that we know roads and transit go hand in hand. So under the Go Hillsboro plan, intersection improvements, signalization improvements, they aren't just car improvements, it's a comprehensive network that bus takes advantage of and comes together to have an impact on the growth of congestion and traffic flow. So we are supporting within all these programs what differences would look like with that investment. We take advantage of them on the bus side too, and we anticipate and hope that we can continue to work closely and leverage the possible funding that the cities and the county would have under this initiative to help them move their transit strategies and pull together into a fully integrated network that could include a modernized streetcar and it could include fully fledged BRT. We're working together now and we anticipate that continuing into the future. So in closing, we know that we are at a critical point now in the conversations about transit and transportation for the community. And by default, this is a critical time for HART. So we want to make sure the information HART is taking out shows a very strong, reasonable investment with our status quo funding, but also shows how this investment, if folks choose to make it, how HART makes the decisions to invest that and come up with a really community-driven transportation network.
Okay, Mr. Commissioner Beckner and then Commissioner Merman.
Thank you. And first, let me just state that how pleased I am to see how the coordination efforts that's going between this agency as well as Go Hillsboro. I have a lot greater comfort that we're on the same general page than we did in 2010. Let me start with a couple of higher level detail or higher level questions. You had spoke to the the status quo plan, and then you spoke to the vision plan. What is basically the difference in the funding between the status quo and the vision plan? The difference between the two plans?
Do you know what the number is exactly? We can probably come back with that more specifically. The key difference here is with our vision plan this year, scaling it to the Go Hillsboro, we've made that assumption about $30 million a year additionally. But we will have that information, and we'll make sure also to present that to the public at the outreach, because that's probably a question that we can anticipate.
And that's where I'm going with this, is I'm wondering how much the additional 30 million, how much more does that completely fund our vision plan, or what percentage of that does that fund, or how much more would we have to go to fully implement our vision plan?
That's an excellent question. The unconstrained vision plan, as presented last year, depending on the year, ranged anywhere from a $60 to $90 million investment. Bear in mind that went to a target of doubling absolute bus miles and doubling van service, which requires essentially a doubling of all we looked at were the bus side. We also factored in park and rides with parking garages, and we were very expansive. There was not a fiscal constraint. Where we are now is the same place that the county and the cities are at. All of the entities participating with Go Hillsboro had an unfunded plan which was larger than the amount of money which is proposed from Go Hillsboro. So all the entities are going through the process of truing up and saying, what of this visionary plan, this larger plan, can you fund? So there is still a gap between what is able to be funded under Go Hillsboro, even leveraging our state and federal plans, and what we have shown you in previous years. A big difference there is in previous years, we did not have a financial target we were trying to hit, and this year we are.
But the additional funding, the 30 million, so it sounds like maybe a third to one half of the additional revenues required for our vision plan?
Yes, sir.
And then where would that put us with the additional 30 million? Where would that take us from our fleet today, both on our regular buses and the bus rapid transit? How would that increase our fleet to what numbers?
We presume the addition of a van facility, which would allow us to move the van fleet and expand it 21st, and then we presume the addition of a bus fleet. So we can get you out on the weekly what we have for tentative fleet numbers. The second facility for bus would be built to have a full capacity that within the next 10 years we wouldn't realize. It would still have room for growth, but we'll get that out this week for you.
Yeah, that would be great. How long, the plan that you have presented here, so that there's a reasonable expectation with the public, assuming that a referendum passes and this revenue stream starts, and you outline the additional services, what is the implementation phase? I mean, are you looking at 10 years to fully implement what you just presented today, or how aggressively do we have the capacity to go out and implement this plan once revenue's there?
This shows full implementation at the end of the 10-year window. A point to remember is the lump sum of $30 million coming in is split between capital and operating.
Right.
And at this point, the Metro Rapid corridors we have identified aside from East-West, don't have the projected ridership to leverage into federal matching. So it presumes completely being funded by HART. Obviously, in the first year, we would be looking at our infrastructure investment. What are the best decisions about expanding van? Do we continue to partner with the county? Marco's office has been leading up looking at remote use of county facilities so we can increase the van fleet. It takes us a year and a half to purchase a bus. It does not make sense to lease a vehicle on a bus side. On a van it does, but on the bus side there are different maintenance issues we get into. So if a funding were to be made available January 31st, 2017, we could use that to place a bus order, but we would have to find van-based, off-base, and weekend and private contractor solutions to get us to the point that we could start adding buses in. So what you would see in 2017 would be some express growth, an awful lot of van growth, big investment in technology, and we've been speaking with our friends at Tabarta about getting van pools out there to be the seed that when the buses are available to us, we've got the ability to meet that express need.
Yeah, I would just close by just saying that when we present this, we just need to give some reasonable expectations. Because what you don't want to do is present this whole entire plan and people vote for this, and all of a sudden in 2017 they're asking where all these services are that they're starting to pay for now.
Absolutely.
And so we just need to set the reasonable expectations when we're presenting this, how these things are phased in. I know this is early stages of this, but just somehow work in expectations as we're making the presentation.
What we will take out for the meetings are and again, it's still tentative, but year by year of what kind of investments the agency would be making, we really do want a lot of public feedback on sequencing.
Right.
And the reason being, just like on a road, if you think an 8-lane facility is coming in, you might not add a turn lane somewhere, but the turn lane might still really be important if you can't get to an 8-laner. We need to hear from our constituents, the folks who are taking us now and the folks who want to take us, what's most important for them to see happen faster. Based on that sequencing, what you will have for your September evaluation is a year-by-year project list saying, to the best of our knowledge where we stand today, here's what 2017 looks like, and 2018 and 2019. And then based on how folks need to see that package to, do they want a 5-year vision, a 3-year vision, we'll have that available. And the beauty of the tool that Marco is showing on the ArcView tool, folks can see that. They can say, what's my universe look like in 2018? Very dynamic. It helps them see exactly what's in it for them.
Perfect. Commissioner Merman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And again, I would echo the comments. I mean, since I've been on this board, I've asked for the vision, something like, where are we going? And I think this is really a great start, and I commend staff for doing it. Though I just see a couple of areas. If everything was to go perfectly, the very last map, I mean, there is huge growth in apartments in West Chase. And people, I think, from Go Hillsboro ask for more service. I see that area still not as populated with transit as I would like. And also, one other thing we heard from the South Tampa outreach was a flex service from downtown through Hyde Park to help relieve some of the parking issues they have. As you know, they have really, all the business owners in Soho have combined forces, and they are really getting more and more active. I think there's possibility for P3 here, and I guess that was one of the other questions I wanted to ask was how much can P3 be a part of this, and how are you going to structure that in your strategic planning to approach P3 based on what you know of going on in other major metropolitan areas like ours in the community that do, P3 with their transit?
We'll come back with something that has the structure around it of what looks like a P3. I believe Councilman Suarez has been working with some of the Soho vendors. We are today rolling out, bad transit pun, but we're rolling out the rebranded in-towner trolley, and there has been significant interest from our friends in the Soho area of getting this trolley out there on a 10-minute frequency just to circulate folks Fridays and Saturdays.
Huge interest.
With an opportunity for the vendors to pay for it, which gives us the ability to be a lot more flexible in the service which we are providing. We do have a solicitation out right now to partner with taxi cabs to alleviate the huge unmet need on our van side. Our van patrons are tied to a transit network that we know is not adequate, even if you have the flexibility of the bus. And when you go to van, it gets worse for you. And you will hear from some of those folks today. So we've got that on the street, and by the end of this fiscal year, we will have the first mile, last mile solicitation out there. But let us talk to our friends at the county and also MPO in a better way to structure that. So it's really called out, here's where the private investment can make that difference in our transit network.
Okay, and one other question I had, if you got the $30 million, you put it all in infrastructure, how much more on top of that would you need for operating?
We would have to go do some math.
I mean,
Let me
is it
come
like
back
a
with that.
third or a half?
Roughly now, about a third of this goes into capital. And
Okay.
2/3 stays in operations. Remember, for us as a bus company, half our budget is half our budget is salaries. 2/3 of our budget salaries and benefits. We are an employment agency that consumes fuel because people fix our vehicles and people drive our vehicles. They're the heart of our service. So it is a big consumption right now. We do about an $80 million budget with maybe $15 million in capital. So let us go back and look with infrastructure. If it 100% went into infrastructure, which would be park and rides, bus stops, BRT corridors, as well as Metro Rapid, what that would fund, it'll take us a little while to get that, but we'll come back with that.
Okay, and one last question. Two things I heard the most about in the Go Hillsboro was, especially in South Tampa, was the empty buses. And so I guess I'm just going to ask you, what kind of ongoing, I know you keep saying you do surveys, yada, yada. I mean, I was driving around Del Mabry yesterday about 5:30 and passed by 3 empty big buses. And I guess I want to know, like, what type of work analysis are you doing that could prevent that, or go to smaller buses, use the bigger buses for more express routes, or, you know, things that we've been talking about? You know, I don't know what you do, so.
We have we do a combination with our fleet of the larger buses and the smaller buses. When we run the smaller vehicles, again, our biggest cost drivers are the operator and the mechanic. So going to a smaller vehicle does not really save us money. However, if you're in a neighborhood and you see a big bus versus a small bus, you're going to feel like a small bus is a better use of resources. So it's a balance here of perception versus what the actual cost driver is. You are absolutely right. On Dale Mabry on a Saturday, you will see empty vehicles. If you're out there rush hour at 8 o'clock catching that first bus in the morning, it's standing room only by the time it gets to Hudson, before even Linebaugh. Same way Dale Mabry at 8 o'clock on a Monday is crawling, and if you're out there on the weekend, there's all this excess capacity, which is out there, so when folks need it, it's there. It is a balancing act to be able to have the frequency that folks need for transit to be able to come home from work, if they have a Sunday job, go to the movies, go to their house of worship, whether it's Friday, Saturday, or Sunday. There's got to be a level of frequency, a guarantee there that folks know, if I sign my lease, if I purchase my home, if I enroll my children, I still have that transit. Versus the fact that on the weekends, we just don't have as many folks, and nowhere in the country has as many folks. So we can get some numbers put together on our experience of the cost between the larger and the smaller buses, but it's probably beyond just taking it to a smaller bus and saying, is there a van? Could we have a flex out there? Something which really is addressing that capacity. And the first last mile is one of our steps in that direction. We understand there's places that after 10 p.m. we'll have 2 people on a bus. But those 2 people need to get home. What's the most cost-effective way to get them there? First mile, last mile is our first attempt at that. And not just to get them home, but to let our taxpayers feel that we're making better use of their money. So we'll come back with some cost numbers and confirm with our partners what they're doing.
I think there's just a perception out there that we're not being efficient because of the empty buses and the fact that we also don't have a lot of service in South County and also in Northwest. I do want to just let you know there's going to be 100 additional meetings for Go Hillsboro. And I see Bob Clifford back there, and he's smiling, of course. I just don't want us to be on a collision course with people that are going to get confused. They did get confused when MPO was doing their whatever they were doing, South County. They didn't know who to believe, and they saw different maps and different things. So I think I would suggest that you work with Bob Clifford if you are going places and they can combine meetings.
Yeah, we have been. So they'll actually be at our meetings as well. And we plan to have representation and participate in the Go Hillsboro meetings too. So hopefully it's relatively seamless. And we have been coordinating for some time to make sure that we don't confuse people with the quantity and the nature of different meetings.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Director?
Yeah. First of all, great vision plan. It looks like there was a lot of input put into it to come up with the prioritization. I guess I just would reiterate, and I have a couple questions. Did we adjust the vision plan pre or post Go Hillsboro meeting? So has this been, like we had the TPD plan, we're updating the TPD plan, and this incorporates the feedback from the first 36 meetings. Is that a correct statement?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
It is.
So then, and we're going to tie the vision plan to the referendum in real clear terms, because it sounds like, and I was one that raised status quo, and I'm sorry, but I like to know where the funding's coming from, what the assumptions are in fundings, because I think that's very important as you allocate services and raise expectations for additional services for people to have a sense of where that's coming from. And so I think it's important as we go through from a, county perspective, this debate about the evaluation of increased taxes that we're gonna pay, what those services are gonna look like. And I would tie it to that. So you gotta be clear with what is the ongoing system of services that we provide, and what could the new plan look like with bells and whistles, that is really directly responsive, at least what we currently know, to the first 36 meetings. It would be additionally responsive to the additional 100 meetings with additional input from the public, because we're a public agency. Is that a fair statement to make in summary?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And then the only other thing I'd say is I hope we're collecting emails and phone numbers of you said you had 300 meetings already or 300 engagements. I mean, the more we can collect data and then keep the public who are interested in these services informed as the process continues is going to be super critical, because it is going to be confusing. There's, every other editorial in the papers about transportation, this, that, people want to be supportive, but they also want to be knowledgeable. And I think we need to be held accountable to those expectations. And the only way to do that is to collect in real time people's information that they're willing to share and say, we'll keep you apprised as this evolves, because you're not going to be able to get the same people in the room. So I would like to know how many people attend our meetings, and I think we'll get, more and more people as we sort of continue to do outreach.
We'll absolutely do that.
Okay, any other questions? Mr. Jacobs?
I just want to jump on your point there. I think one of the most critical things in this plan is a communications plan. Because perception is reality, and I think what you brought up in terms of people perceiving empty buses and inadequate service or not planning effectively, I think the communication of what we're going to be doing, and as this moves forward and as it evolves out into the community, is critical to the success. So looking at it from a communication standpoint and the public outreach and connecting with the community and expressing what we're doing, and hopefully getting our community leaders in our neighborhoods understanding exactly how it affects them is really, I think, one of the key cogs to the success of the whole strategy.
Thank you. Director DeRoche?
Yeah, this is the first look that I've had at the TDP, and I have to say I'm very impressed. I like to see the fact that we are providing new service for commuters. There's a lot of circulators, and just think that we've done a good job addressing the needs that I've heard expressed, being in the county, out in the county area. One thing I would like to see as you go forward and we clarify, and I just want to say to Justin, give a call out to him. I thought he did a really good job, the planning staff. I know there's a lot of staff, kind of unsung heroes behind the scenes, and so as we get to see some of them, I just want to make sure we thank them for that. But as we do firm up these things a little bit more, and I think probably that has already been done in the process, I like to see the productivity, cost per trip. Right now, we're averaging about $4 a trip with our bus service. I did notice in the packet that our paratransit costs have continued to go down. When I first started here, we were at $37 a trip, and we're down now just under $30, if I'm getting that correctly. I mean, that's very good. So I know when we expand service such as this, sometimes it does open up unintended costs, such as paratransit, but it looks like we've been addressing that pretty well. But I would like to see what our productivity numbers look when that information is ready, to make sure that we're not, departing too drastically. And we do have to balance, getting service where people need it, and also balance the costs that we incur. But so far, the first look at it, I'm pretty happy with what I see. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Melendez?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I definitely want to echo sentiments expressed thus far, and really, I just note that staff, you've really knocked this out of the park, in my opinion. Frankly, I think this is one of the most important documents that I've held since I've served on the HART board. It's clear, it's articulate, it's specific. To me, it's a leadership document. It allows us to go out you know, amongst the agencies, the MPO, and different meetings, and say, you know, HART has articulated what we can do with status quo funding and what we can do if there is a referendum passed. And I say it's a leadership document based. There are two key principles that I say that based upon, and that's you know, people making an informed vote. This has a specific list of projects, and with graphics, and then it also shows folks that we're good stewards of the taxpayer dollar. And I just really want to thank staff for allowing me as a board member to be able to go out and do that. And I think that's going to be important for all of us to do that. You know, there certainly our staff has our, you know, communication staff and a plan, but I think we have a responsibility to go out and do that as well. Finally, I heard the FDOT articulate last week at a meeting. They were talking about the Tampa Bay Express project and some of the challenges there. And one of the statements that was made, it was kind of suggested that, you know, the DOT really needs to know, you know, from county leaders, you know, what else is going to be done. So seeing, you know, what HART can do with $30 million a year, I think I don't want to put anyone on the spot, but I really am looking to our county leaders, and I say this as a county resident up there in the West Chase area. I'm going to be looking to see.
West Chase.
Yeah. I'm going to be looking, you know, because for me personally, you know, to get to facilities like we want to propose down the road, you have to have good roads, good infrastructure, and I just really want to urge our county leaders to really articulate what's going to be done with a balance of a potential referendum on it, because back to the informed vote principle, people are going to make that decision based upon an informed vote and a specific list. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Carino.
I'd like to echo those compliments. This is a great plan and a great start. However, staff, I don't envy your jobs. It's challenging, right? And it sounded like one of the primary things that you heard from the community was, I need more reliability in my service if this is going to be my primary mode of transportation. I need to be able to, if I take it to work during the day, I need to be able to get home at night. If I don't have a car, I need to be able to get around on the weekends, which, by the way, is very contrary to the idea of not seeing empty or low capacity buses, right? By definition, when you create a more reliable network, you have areas and times where you're going to have lower capacity, but that's the trade-off for reliability. And as it relates philosophically and from a vision standpoint, just to make sure I kind of understand it, right? So for the status quo, what you're basically saying is, we're going to identify core routes and core services, and we're going to make a promise to those folks who have to rely on bus as their primary mode of transportation. If you live here, we will get you here. Over the long term, over the next 10 years, we are committed. If you're going to live here, we will get you here so people can make life choices, leases, houses, employment choices around our core transportation routes. And status quo, we're not going to mess with those. And we will try to add last mile connectors, additional service, and so on as the opportunities arise based on the status quo budget. And then the vision sort of takes things to a whole nother level. Is that an appropriate articulation of the philosophy?
Yes, yes.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments? At this time, I just want to make a couple of comments. First of all, thanks, Marco, for the presentation. You did a terrific job. In terms of what the TDP means each and every year, and I'm doing this primarily for the press, is that we do this every year, and that we do it every 5 year on the major upgrade, primarily because conditions change on a yearly or a 5 year period. So there are some aspirational parts of this, and there are things that we have to do specifically for federal and state guidelines. It doesn't mean that we get everything that we want. We have to adjust our budgets, as we did over the last 4 years after the economic downturn in 2008. And we keep trying to struggle with what those numbers are going to look like. When we had the discussion about what the increase on the millage, on the properties rate was going to be, it's based on whatever those numbers from Tallahassee, and we try and be very conservative. I think that we have a very good CFO in Jeff Seward in terms of what we are able to present to the public based on the dollars that we bring in. We try to be good stewards, and we keep pushing towards that. To some of the specific questions that Commissioner Merman asked, and I want to just flesh this out because Catherine Egan had mentioned it. We are right now looking at a pilot project with the city and with the Soho district, specifically to allow people to park in the downtown area. I talk about capacity on the weekends. There we have a lot of capacity in our parking garages. That charge for parking will then be used for traveling to Soho on a circulator. So we're already putting that into process. We've already met with them, and that is an example of a P3. And for those people who don't know what P3 is public-private partnership, which is that we put some dollars into it, the local businesses put some dollars into it, and we provide the service. It helps the neighborhood, it helps the parking situation, it helps the people that want to go to Soho. It makes it a win-win-win for everyone. It doesn't always happen, and hopefully it'll be a great success, but those are the type of things that we look at. But the one thing that, when we talk about public-private partnerships, is the private part is always looking for money. That's the one thing that is difficult for us to provide unless we have a revenue source coming in. Regardless of whatever that might be, whether it's a sales tax or ad valorem, businesses do not go into a partnership with us unless they see that there's some dollars, and reliable dollars at that, going into it. So this aspirational document, and the one quibble I have for you is that it is not the Go Hillsboro Plan. That's recommendations. We're going to be working on the plan from now until November 5th. So that's the only thing that I would tell the press. This is something that is still a work in progress, that we're working closely with the policy leadership group, and HART is working to make sure that those things that we can provide and those dollars that we're able to get in terms of what we can provide towards transit are going to be well spelled out for the public. So thank you again. Commissioner Miller.
I changed my mind. I think I want to say something.
Okay, go ahead. Hopefully it wasn't because of what I said.
You say anyway. One of the things that I think is going to be important in these next 100 meetings that we're going to have with Go Hillsboro is that the criticism that Go Hillsboro has so far is that there's focusing mostly on roads. But people have to realize that in 2010, when the plan was put forth there, we didn't do hardly any meetings at all to go to the public to determine what they wanted to see done. We've done that this time, and we're going back for another 100 meetings. One of the things that we focus on, yes, is roads, but it's vitally important that in these 100 meetings that this plan that's in the works is out there with those meetings, because it's going to show that not only are we talking about roads, which we're going to need the roads to get the buses down, and all the other things, but it shows that HART has put together a plan ongoing, still will be ongoing, determining whether we're going to have this thing pass or not. But if it does pass, this is what's going to happen with some of the money that you're talking about. It's not only focusing on roads, it's talking about getting people around. If we're going to have a county that we want to bring jobs, and that's what the county commission's been talking about, and the Go Hillsboro Plan has been talking about also economic development and redevelopment. We've got to make sure that every aspect of transportation is involved. Roads, HART, the whole works. But we're talking about, we're not talking about a rail system for the city of Tampa. Nowhere does it talk about in Go Hillsboro that you can't do that in the city of Tampa if you want to. So I think that's important, that if we're going to be at those 100 meetings, and I hope we are, this has to be there. This has to be there to show people what we're doing.
Yeah. Thank you, Commissioner. Mr. Melendez again.
Just a quick follow-up and clarification, because I think what's important about this, and to Commissioner Miller's point, I think it'll also be important to show if what the alternative is if you don't vote for the referendum. We've also clearly articulated that as well. So I just want to make that point, and I think that's great.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Merman.
That's the most important point of the whole discussion is, do you want things to stay the way they are? Because that's what happens if we don't go forward. And I think that's what you need to articulate, that status quo versus the fully funding. That vision with those projects, people can really see the difference. But I did want to say one thing. There is no meeting planned for West Chase. And I think that is an area, West Chase people are not going to go to the Town Country Library. We tried in Go Hillsboro. They don't. Your population is in West Chase right now. Population in Town Country doesn't change that much. So I'm just saying Citrus Park, West Chase, you need to get up there and do one of these meetings. I know, Commissioner Beckner, you live up there. It's population explosion in that area. And people want transit, and they want reliable transit so that they don't have to take their car to work.
And there's, I think, a good opportunity for us to do that, a joint meeting in the West Chase area with the Go Hillsboro meetings, because some of those will overlap with our period.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Marco. Appreciate it.